Now we move into the next segment of this session, which is that Professor Inge Brouwer and Cherrie Atilano will give their presentations, and they're actually of very, very different nature. So Inge Brouwer, of course, being a professor, will give us kind of some of the latest insight into science, and Cherrie will have a slightly different topic that she's going to share with us. And I'll introduce that when we get there. But first of all, Inge, I would like to give you the floor to share your presentation, and so let's hope that the internet keeps on working. So far, it's so good.
Yes, let's hope so. So I would like to ask Bram to share the slides, and I will say next slide when I would like to proceed. I hope you don't mind that I will close my screen because that will save some internet space, and then let's hope that it will run fine. I would like to talk a bit about what is actually a food system approach. And if you go to the next slide, I would like to talk about food systems, go a bit into transformation, also talk a bit about the common myths that I always meet when talking about food systems, and a bit on the how-to question that need to be answered. I have to explain that I'm a nutritionist from Wageningen University, but I also work at the International Food Policy Research Institute. And at this institute, I'm leading a large CGR program on sustainable healthy diets through food system transformation. So we use so-called reverse thinking. So we start with the diet, look at the dietary gaps, and then backcast into the food system to find out what actually needs to be changed in the food system to have a better outcome on healthy diets. Together, looking at trade-offs and synergies for other outcomes related to economic development, livelihood, decent incomes, as well as the environmental footprint. So next slide, what was already highlighted is that the call for food system transformation is actually becoming more and more urgent. And this gives a picture of the World Economic Forum, who interviewed more than 1,200 experts from government, academia, business, and the international community, civil society, about what they perceive as the largest risks. And as you can see, there are many interconnected risks related to economic and environmental, geopolitical, societal, and technological related risks that are all interrelated, and they contribute to a kind of holy crisis that's coming towards us, accelerating the consequences for human and planetary health and survival, actually, of mankind. Stressing the importance that we really need systemic changes, not only in the food systems, but as I said, also in other systems. But let's focus on food systems. And if you go to the next, there are different framings of why food systems should change. Can you go to the next slide, Bram? Yeah. So we as nutritionists, we are really worried about the malnutrition, and we say that it's because next Bram. We are worried about stunting and underweight, and also the increasing overweight and obesity, and we say diets is because of that, and we need to improve our diets to actually counteract against these levels of malnutrition. If you go to the agriculturists amongst us, their framing of the need for food system transformation is different, and is based on the worry that there is not sufficient food in the future to feed the population that's growing fast in 2050. And a lot of emphasis is put on reducing food loss and waste. But if you go to economists, they are mainly worried about the distribution. So they say our health status has never been better than presently. And we do have enough food in the world, but it's because of the bad distribution amongst several populations. So next, Bram. And then also the next one again. Are agroecologists that are actually saying, well, we can do whatever we want, but if we pass our planetary boundaries, then the end will come very soon. And that of the of food system all see by play a central role in the food systems and also in food system transformation. Next slide. So this framing and the vision you have on the need for food system transformation, can you click a few times, Bram? Yeah, so also determines actually in what area you are looking for solutions to these failing food systems, and where the agriculturists are looking for closing the yield gap, nutritionists are looking for closing the nutrient gap, economists are looking at decentralization, going into the wrong direction, and for which food system transformation is urgent. And of course, we know that all these things need to happen. But a lot, what I see in the countries that I work with, is that certain visions are actually more emphasized than other visions. And I will come back later to that. So next slide. A lot is written about food systems and the food system approach and food system governance and food system transformation. And many frameworks have been developed. For example, within Wageningen University, we are working with 10 different frameworks, varying from very simple frameworks to utterly complex frameworks. Some are linear, some are more circular, and they differ in outcomes and they differ in the parts or components that are highlighted. So there's still a lot to do to get a common understanding of food systems. Next slide. By the way, as nutritionists, we are using the high-level panel of experts model or framework that's depicted here. Because the diets are playing a more central role in this framework. But I think all of us we do agree that the food system comprises of all elements and activities that are related to the pathway from production to consumption and disposal of food, and that it comprises outcomes at different levels related to social, economic, and environmental outcomes. And we also realized that a food system is very complex, with complex interactions between multiple actors, from producers, food chain agents, and consumers, who are managing a different agri-food value chains, and to do that in a dynamic way. So it's changing all the times. And it's on multiple levels. So some are focusing on global level, others are country level or regional level, and that there are multiple drivers that are changing our food environment. And it's dynamic because there are feedback loops and there are trade-offs and synergies. I think in that respect, in all the framing that you see, these elements are actually coming. Mainly food systems at that time. Next slide, Bram. And what we saw is, I don't see the next slide, but don't know what's happening. What we see in this highly cited national and international report is that there is a lot of talk about the need for radical reforms. Well, our food systems are broken, they are failing us, and there's also an indication that we can fix it. And of course, that's really difficult to fix the food system, what we have experienced now. It's a long process with lots of people involved. And there's not such a thing that we have one technology or a group of technologies that we can implement and then we can fix the broken food system, like we are fixing a flat tire of our bicycle. So if we look at all the frameworks and all the reports, you see again different emphasis. So there's supply orientation, midstream orientation, focusing on better markets. And then you also have demand orientation, which is starting with the consumptive demands. And you have system-oriented governance. And if you look at the multiple reports, many of them use the framing of supply and market and midstream orientation. And fewer are starting from a demand orientation. And really even fewer are talking about system-oriented or governance orientation. And in many of the reports, and even reports to now, if you, for example, would like to read something about nutrition or diets, it's certainly mentioned as an important outcome in the first 4 pages of a report. But if you go down to strategies and plans to indeed change food systems towards healthier diets, you find hardly any programs or strategies to solve this. So very few reports focus on demand, on fewer on, even fewer on governance. Next slide. And there are, while working in Ethiopia, Vietnam, and Bangladesh, and even today, I had discussions with the Ministry of Food. You see that there are some, well, let's call them myths, thoughts about nutrition that are very difficult to change. So, and the first one is that economic growth and reduced poverty will lead to better diets and reduced malnutrition. Well, from studies, we know that that is not automatically the case. Extra things should happen to really translate reduced poverty towards better nutrition status. For example, women's empowerment is very important, and also linking with behavior change communication. Another myth is that closing the yield gap will produce enough food. But the question is, of course, whether closing the yield gap, which is very often focusing on staple foods and kilocalories, whether that will really nourish the people. The third one is that many say, well, consumers demand what is best for them. And well, we know if you think about yourself, is it really true that you demand for what is best for yourself? And I think that most of us have to answer that question with no. And food companies are often saying, well, consumers are asking for our products, so therefore we are producing them or processing them. But of course, consumers do not know always what is best for them, and they should be helped to make their choice. There's also people that really believe that if you introduce a technology that will lead to an improved food system outcome. But we know from research that there should always be a combination of a technology introduction and behavior change components together. Also, income by credit and subsidies will improve diets, but we know that is not for all. Not all people have access to credit. And we also know that if credit is given out to women, it will certainly better translate into improved diets of their family. Another myth, and that will be a hard one, is about protein transition. Protein transition will make the world better, but the question is for whom? And it's nice if I can share also some publications on the protein transition and the alternative proteins taken over by big meat industries and what kind of effect that has on the markets. Protein in general is not the most, let's say, limiting nutrient. And by reducing livestock to meat and meat to proteins, we are not doing justice to the dietary problems that we are facing. And the last one is also very hard, which is, and we hear that very often, and not only in the countries I work, also in the Netherlands, is that cereals provide most of the nutrients, which is right. Yeah, they do, because people do not eat diverse diets. But the idea is, if they provide so much nutrients, we should ensure that we increase or that we have more cereals production, so they get better or more nutrients, which is not the case. We should more focus on diversification of the diet. If we continue, what is often missing is the attention to consumers. Bram, the next slide. What I hear also is that people do not eat is know actually what that's part. But the choices people make. Can you go to the next slide, Bram? Maybe my internet is slow. The choices that people make are actually subordinate to the choices that they have. So people do have a lot of drivers or reasons to make choices or to be wanting sufficient food. And with this, well, I would say a backpack full of reasons, which is related to knowledge, income, but also their religion, whether they are a woman or a man, taste, whether they have access to transport. With all these, they go into their food environment. So they go to markets, they go to school, they go to their workplace, they walk around in the community, and they meet the retailers there that are offering them food. And they are offering food under marketing and regulations. The food has specific prices, which is determining affordability together with the income of the consumer. Availability of food. Some foods are maybe wanted, but they are not available. The accessibility, some foods are not there, or they have to travel long distances but do not have transport. The vendor and product properties, and then also the level of convenience that is offered is actually determining what consumers are eating. So if you go to the next slide, and the food environment, and that's the place where people are meeting or consumers are meeting the food system, also changes. So going from natural food environments towards more built food environments. And also the types of food that are consumed are shifting from more the fresh foods to the more highly processed foods in the formal markets. So we need to target the various food environments, and priority areas to target food environments may also change when countries undergo a transition. So the next slide, I would like to go a bit deeper into transformation, because in the first years we work on food systems, we are more busy in how to relate food systems to diets. But actually now we talk about, can we use improving diets to transform food systems, or can we improve diets through food system transformation? And we do realize that food systems are changing all the time, are very dynamic. And through research, we identified 3 big groups or categories of intervention that could help to change or to transform food systems. One of them is through policies, and with the nutrition framing, we talk about sugar policies, but also policies that relate or regulate informal markets. The other way is to build coalitions of the unusual or build networks. And the third one is breed a diversity of innovations, which could be technological and social innovations that can be used to transform food systems. So in countries like Vietnam and Ethiopia, we work a lot through policies, because the governments are relatively strong and work with directions through policies towards subnational level. In Bangladesh, it's different because there we work with so-called network organizations, so organizations that are overseeing work of different ministries and work together with larger multi-stakeholders. So we work there more in the area of coalitions of the unusual, and we try to find evidence of different innovations that could have the potential to contribute to a change of food system transformation. You hear already how careful I formulate that. So if we go to the next, just to show you the food system transformation pathway, food system transformation national action plan of Ethiopia. They do identify different game changers, and this slide needs to be updated because recently they added an extra game changer. And for example, one of the game changers is the National Food-Based Dietary Guidelines. So we helped the Ethiopian government to develop these guidelines, and it's seen as an innovation or a game changer, but I have to admit that we do not have sufficient information, or evidence that a food-based dietary guideline indeed transform or contribute to a transformation of a food system. So the next point is the whole architecture that is developed around food system transformation, with whom you have to work together towards the change of the outcomes of food system. Next slide. I have 2 slides to go. This is an example of innovation that we are working in Hanoi and in Ibadan, Vietnam and Nigeria, which shows that we really have to look for a bundling of different innovations or interventions together. So both interventions at the retail level to develop viable business models, at the household level to increase affordability through coupons, and also combining it with promotional campaigns. This is a small pilot which really showed that we increased the intake of fruits and vegetables. Now, the last slide is giving an overview of what we do in the initiative that I'm leading. So we look at characterizing diets and consumers in relation to their food environment. We also characterize the micro, small, and medium enterprises and the informal market because they are the ones that supply most of the diet to the consumer. We proceed now in testing solutions and innovations, so technological, social, but also policy innovations in the food environment, consumer nexus. And we support food system governance as well as understanding and navigating between this trade-off. So looking back at how we could influence food systems, one, we are finding evidence and contribute to the diversity of solutions and innovations. And next, we are building partnerships and coalitions. And third is to identify barriers in governance and unintended consequences at the same time in a country, with the hope that we contribute to a food system transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inge, for that comprehensive presentation. And thank you also for paying attention to food system transformation and how that can work. And of course, Inge was just touching upon that topic, but at the same time, it's good for you to realize that during this e-course, particularly in module 3 and 4, there will be a lot of attention to the question, how do you change food systems, or how do food systems change, and can you influence it? And what works under which conditions, in which context. So a lot of learning, I think, will be happening in subsequent weeks on this particular topic. But of course, if you've got very specific questions on that, feel free to also bring them into the debate. At this moment, I think there's a lot of different questions already present in the chat, and my colleagues, they will be helping me to select a couple of questions that we can put to Professor Inge Brouwer and also to our next speaker, to Cherrie Atilano, afterwards. But first, Inge, I'd like to thank you very much